It is 6 p.m. We do have we have a full membership for the Board of Zoning Appeals here this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and call this evening's meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals to order. First item on this evening's agenda is approval of the minutes of the March 28th, 2024 meeting. Minutes have been submitted to members of the board in ample time to review. Are there any changes or amendments anybody from the board wishes to make? Do we have a motion to approve? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as stated.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. The minutes are approved. In light of the meeting that the board held with Mr. Kazaki last week, we are going to skip the executive session for this evening's meeting and go right to the hearing. Next item on this evening's agenda is hearing number BZA-2024-04, request for variances from the size requirements and number permitted along a street frontage for freestanding signs in the parcel located at 124 South Cashua Drive in the Commercial General Zoning District, identified as tax map number 90024-04-012. Board will now hear from city staff.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So the board originally heard this case back in January 26, 2020, and get it again to get a business license. So at this time, there is no business license at the location. So it has frontage along West Evans Street, South Cashua Drive, and King Avenue. They currently do have a compliant wall sign and 2 freestanding signs. So a freestanding sign along South Cashua Drive and West Evans Street, and those are both in compliance with the Unified Development Ordinance and have been permitted by our office and the building department. It is zoned commercial general. And so this is the table that governs the freestanding sign, how the height, which is capped at 40 feet, and the square footage is capped at 160 square feet. The applicant is requesting the signage at 535 square feet, a variance of almost 375 square feet, and then it would be 6 feet higher than what the Unified Development Ordinance would permit. They can have 3 freestanding signs because they do have 3 street frontages, but it would have to be on King Avenue, or they would have to move one of the signs that they have now, or come back for a variance request to put 2 signs along 1 street frontage. So this is the sign that they want to repurpose, Swamp Fox Entertainment Complex. It was on 501 in Marion, South Carolina. So on the left and then on the right is a rendering of what they would like to turn the sign into. The signage in the front is the size of their existing signs, their freestanding signs, which are 120 square feet, 35 feet high, which is in compliance with the code. As you can see, it's dramatically larger at 535 square feet, and just the digital signage alone is 224 square feet on both sides, which would exceed what is permitted in the Commercial General Zoning District, and would actually exceed the size of billboards that the city permits that are within 600 feet of I-20 or I-95. That's capped at 378 square feet, so it exceeds the size of a billboard. Here is some site photos. You can see the freestanding signs, one along West Evans Street, one on South Cashua Drive, and then you can see the wall sign. So this would be in addition to the signage that they have now. So that does conclude staff's report.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for city staff from members of the board?
Oh, maybe it's a question might be for them. So if they was to repurpose that sign, where would that sign supposed to go? Where would they want that to be?
I would imagine West Evans Street, but at this time they're not requesting a location. It's just for the height and the square footage.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I got a question for the city. You just answered it. The request for a variance for the size requirements, not the number permitted along the street frontage, correct? Because they have, you mentioned 3 signs, which is one is a wall sign,
Correct.
but that doesn't fit the definition of a freestanding sign, so you're allowed to have up to 3, 1 at each frontage.
One on each frontage, that's exactly right. And as they are now, they are in compliance with this signage permitted by the Unified Development Ordinance.
And they can add another sign as
They-
far as to the rear property. Looks like that's King
Avenue, that's
They're
correct.
permitted for there now.
Right. They just can't have 2 signs on one street frontage.
And currently they have one on West Evans and South Castro.
Correct. Yes, sir.
And the wall sign is not considered a,
Right. The wall sign is something separate.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
So just to clarify, the variance request in front of the board is simply for height and area limits.
Correct.
That's the only thing we're concerned with. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Are there any other questions for city staff from members of the board?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Mr.
Chairman,
President.
I do have
Yeah.
another question. You made a mention that on this, would this sign be permitted along the corridors of I-95 and other major areas, or would it not?
It would be too large.
It would be too large even if there, and that's your largest
Right.
signage.
378 square feet is for a billboard, 600 feet, within 600 feet of an interstate. So this would exceed that. It would be too large for a billboard.
Even at the largest
Even
required or allowable required signage.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions for city staff, for members of the board? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
The board will now hear from the applicant, previously listed as Gary Langston. Is Mr. Langston here? All right, Mr. Langston. If you don't mind, sir, please step up to the microphone. State your name clearly for the record.
My name's Michael Hopewell. I'm an attorney here in Florence, and I'm here on behalf of HBS Motorsports.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hopewell. I'm going to swear you in, as we have already discussed, this is a quasi-legal hearing. Do you promise that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth?
Yes, sir.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to answer the question that the member asked of the city staff. The plan would be to move the sign from West Evans to King Avenue. I'm sorry, from South Cashua to King Avenue, and put the sign where that one is. And I do have some news that's new. The top portion of the sign that was the big picture of the fox at the old Swamp Fox, the sign person that we've employed can remove that, and that will reduce the height of the sign by 8 feet and actually bring it into compliance with the height requirement. Currently, it's at 36 feet. The reduction of 8 feet would put it at 38 feet. The height requirement is 40, so that will bring it into compliance on the height requirement. That reduction will also reduce the overall square footage of the sign by 150 square feet, even with the larger size. But the order as written drew the ire of the city manager at that time. He appealed it. The circuit court sent it back for a hearing. And some of the factors that were discussed in the court's order are contained in South Carolina Code Section 6-29-800. That code section was cited in the order. And I can address briefly those 4 factors that the statute addresses, if the board would like me to do that.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
The first factor is that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to this particular piece of property. That piece of property has been empty for at least 10 or 15 years. It was a big grocery store. It closed, another grocery store bought it. It closed again. It's been vacant for well over a decade. I've lived here longer than that, and I know how long it's been vacant. My client bought it They've had to run a bunch of things out of it. People were using it, vandals, animals, vermin, and they want to clean it up and make it into a nice business. Where other businesses have failed, and it's been vacant, it's been an eyesore on the city for years. And I think that's extraordinary and exceptional condition having to do with that parcel of property. And if you drive down South Cashua, there's a little connector that takes you to Evans Street, and there's a median between the connector and Evans Street. And it's got some really tall trees on it. It's kind of a pretty little median, kind of a dangerous intersection, but that's a topic for somebody else. But it's a little bit hard. You can't really see the parking lot from that intersection, the red light of Cashua and Evans. The trees block your view of the parking lot, and the larger sign on Evans would help with that. It would help with that condition. So I think that item A2A in the statute is met as to the extraordinary and exceptional conditions. The next factor is that these conditions do not generally apply to any other property in the vicinity. Again, all the other businesses around there are stable. They've been there for years. They're smaller. There's more visibility. This is a unique parcel of property that we're talking about. And I don't think those conditions apply to anything else in the area. The bank's across the street, the Advanced Auto Parts is down the street, laundromat this way, Schofield's over here. Everything else is different. There's nothing like this in the area. Item C, because of these conditions, the applicant that otherwise they're kind of there. And the fourth and final item listed in the statute is that the authorization of the variance will not be of a substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good and that the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. If this board grants the variance, it's not going to hurt anybody else. It's not going to be to detriment of adjacent property, Advanced Auto Parts, the laundromat and related businesses down Cashua, the bank across. It's not going to hurt anyone. It's going to help them because instead of this eyesore, this overgrown heap that's been there for decades, it's going to be an open, vibrant, tax-producing business. I don't see how it would harm the character of the district. It would enhance it. It would take a rundown, abandoned building and make it into a viable business. It's already been successful in Florence and is looking to expand for that reason. So I think that those factors in the statute are met. And we respectfully request that the board consider this variance. And of course, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Don't go anywhere. Thank you very much, Mr. Hopewell. You brought up a good point. To city staff, have we gotten anything showing a rendering of what the changes that he mentioned to the sign would be?
We have not. We
Okay,
can put
okay.
up the current rendering. And just to be clear, what is the new proposed square footage of this sign?
It would take, and y'all have screens or everybody can see. Everybody can
that's
see
right.
it. The one on the left, and us old timers remember the Swamp Fox complex. The fox will be gone, and that will reduce the height by 6 feet, and that will reduce the square footage, 8 feet. I'm sorry, yeah, reduce it to 38 square feet, which would bring it into compliance with the 40-foot threshold. That would be the change, and so that would take that wheel off the top of the artist rendering on the right. That would be the change that we're talking about. And we have not provided a copy of that with the change to the city to answer Chairman's question.
And what would the reduction in square footage be in removing that? What was
It would
that
be
number?
about 150 square feet. So
Okay.
it would reduce it from 535 to 385
35.
total square footage. So that is the variance that we're seeing, because that would still be out of compliance.
So you're saying the
That would-
will?
Wait. Hold on a second. Go ahead, city staff. Yeah.
So the variance would be for 225 square feet instead of 375 square feet. And no variance would be required for the sign height if the fox was removed.
Yeah.
Or the rim.
Right. Yeah.
So 225.
So that they would need a variance of 225 square feet as opposed to
375. Correct.
And the variance is supposed to be, what's the correct number it's supposed to be?
The maximum square footage is 160 square feet.
Gotcha.
So it would be 225 square feet over that. So the variance is, it's
You still need a
225.
Make sure I'm not wrong. It sounds like they'll still be out of compliance, am I right?
Yes,
With the height still.
Not with the height.
the height's, yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify for everybody on the board, if the proposed changes that Mr. Hopewell just described go into effect, this variance request will not be dealing with the height, just with the overall square footage of the sign, the area of the sign.
And they're asking for a 225 square foot variance for the sign to be allowed. Is that correct?
Rough math, yes. Obviously, we'd have to mention that in the variance request under special considerations, dependent upon whatever rendering is submitted to the city, because it'll have to be submitted again, or the drawing will have to be submitted based on our discussion here.
Because my thing is, if we go that route, then they have to break it back to
All
us.
right, hold on one second now, hold on a second. All right, did you have anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Hopewell from members of the board?
Mr. Hopewell, where is the intended location of the sign? Would it be close to West Evans or in the parking lot like you were just
I think it'd
referencing?
be perhaps on the edge of the parking lot towards the exit, off-ramp, whatever, from Cashua to Evans,
The yield.
Yeah.
where it
Referencing
runs
the
into
yield.
that yield, exactly, where it starts to curve,
Can we
and then
put
the
the PowerPoint
median's on
back
the
up?
other side of it, towards the
Thank you.
traffic light.
I think that's called some type of city park. I think there's actually a name for it.
I think it's
I
a
think it's
bench
high.
that sits right there.
I think it's Tyler Park, I believe.
That's right.
Yes.
I've heard there's talks about them wanting to get rid of that altogether somehow,
You can't go off assumption.
make it a hard intersection.
But essentially, what you're saying, Mr. Hopewell, just to answer his question, for a visual, upper right-hand corner of the red area-ish, where the proposed sign may go, perhaps, maybe.
I'm not sure about that. Upper right-hand corner.
Closer to AutoZone, I
Where
should
it
say.
could be seen over those trees, probably.
Yeah.
I haven't pointed it out.
Can you point it out here?
Cause that's a deep yield.
This area here,
Okay,
Okay,
okay.
that's what.
I got you. Okay,
if you're looking from this intersection, you can't really even see the building from
right. Okay.
The trees. Thanks.
Will it stand above the trees?
tree-
That'd be,
yeah.
is there,
Question that.
kind of make
It
it
would be visible probably between and through them more than stand above them, because I don't think it would stand above them.
Not if you.
I drove it today, and I think they're taller than that, but,
It would still be 38 feet in height.
right.
All right. Are there any other questions for Mr. Hopewell from members of the board?
Yes. So the plan is to remove one sign that you already have up and put that sign there, correct?
Yes, sir, the sign that's on Cashua Street now would be removed to King Avenue, where it would be permitted a sign on each street. So the sign that's there on Cashua now would go to King, and the new sign, if permitted, would go to Cashua.
Is that considered casual in that curve? Because you're saying putting it right into the center of the curve, the yield, right?
In that area, I mean, would have to be placed so it's considered on Cashua, but that's where it would be. There's already one on the corner of Evans towards the Advanced Auto Parts.
I think if it advertised towards South Cashua Drive, we would, I think that would be permitted. We just can't have them stack up. You just
Right.
can't have two
Two
signs
right.
stacked up.
Yep.
Advertising on Evans or two advertising on South Cashua.
So, according to the way he showed us, that would be on Evans. That wouldn't be closer to Cashua. That'd be closer to the AutoZone. Am I correct? From the way he showed us to just now.
I think we would have to meet the intent of the ordinance, but as it is written, they are permitted a freestanding sign to advertise along each street frontage. So we would, I think city staff would work with them to try to meet the intent of the code.
Is there any threat to safety with having a sign right there? I guess more so from a visual standpoint, because it looks like the sign is automated and plays things. I don't think we have any sign that's live in the city. I could be wrong.
There are codes to stay out of what's called the visibility triangle. So we would take into account any DOT regulations that would hinder, vehicular, any visibility of that nature. And then we also have an ordinance as far as optical sensors, how bright these signs can be at night. They have to be self-adjusting, as well as DOT regulations for how fast they can move. They have to change within 2 seconds, and then they have to stay stationary for 6 seconds. And then, so there are some regulations about you can't just have a movie playing on the sign to distract drivers. So there are DOT regulations, city regulations to prevent that.
And is that something y'all be willing to, because is that the type of signage that is?
Absolutely, no entertainment, it would be,
I'm sorry.
it would be power sports vehicles,
Okay.
slingshots, ATVs, super trucks, bigger trucks than normal, that type of thing. No entertainment.
Thank you.
And does the variance on this, whether we accept or not, do they have anything to do with whether y'all were open or not? Would this have a conflict of
I don't-
you
I don't-
moving forward in your plans?
I don't think so.
Just help us generate more sales It's gonna be a Polaris Suzuki. We just purchased the Honda Kawasaki Yamaha dealership down on Generation 3. So we're gonna hoping to combine the two stores into one location and make it a super store. It could possibly be one of the largest power sports dealerships in the southeast, generating $500,000 plus in sales tax yearly.
You had a question, Mr. President?
No.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Hopewell from members of the board? All right, thank you, Mr. Hopewell.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wishes to be heard either for or against the variance request? All right. There being none, the chair will now entertain a motion to either approve or deny the variance request before us. And as a reminder, consideration needs to be taken by the board of Mr. Hopewell's statement that the height restriction has met the city requirements, but we were still discussing the variance request regarding the square footage of the area of the sign. It's up for discussion.
And that's 225 square feet, plus or minus,
Estimated,
estimated.
depending upon the final submission of what HPS Motorsports will turn into the city.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
There's something we can do inside of this to make sure that they follow those ordinances, right? Versus having them come back with the correct.
I mean, you can put conditions
Correct.
on the variance, yes.
Because I don't see a problem as long as we put those conditions in place.
Mhm.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, right. And the question for the board is the actual area of the sign.
And
So-
yesterday, they had a fire complaint.
Right.
They were leaning more toward the casual side
Right.
versus the West Evans, because I don't really.
When our location is not up for question. No, it's just the variance request for the actual area of the square footage. Yes.
That's what.
Right.
I just want to remind the board that any discussion needs to is a public discussion.
Right.
And needs to be clear to the
Right on, I'm
public.
sorry.
Oh,
Turn your microphone. Sorry.
Maybe this is directed towards city staff, but just for clarity's sake, are there any pros and cons of, I'm not suggesting they need to come back again, but with these changes, would we be okay if someone did make a motion to approve simply for the essentially as amended? Does that create any heartache on the city or for them? Just from
Consideration when considering the variance. The only thing that should be considered by granting the variance is whether or not there is a hardship shown meeting all the criteria outlined and solely based on the size, and not to confuse that matter with any other standards of the sign ordinance.
Does anybody wishes to make a motion either for or against the variance request before the board? All right, there being none, the chair will make a motion. I make a motion that we deny the variance request based upon the following findings of fact. That a variance from the terms of this ordinance will be contrary to the public interest where, according to special conditions, literal enforcement of the provisions will not in this case result in unnecessary hardship. Although the height requirement has been met, the square footage is still far beyond that which is allowed in city limits. And these numbers are based upon estimated discussions we've had here today of roughly 250 or 275 feet. Number two, that the spirit of the ordinance will be observed, public safety and welfare secured, and substantial justice done. Again, the proposed signage does meet the height requirement as we discussed, but it still exceeds the allowable square footage of even a billboard listed in the commercial general district, far exceeding those presently within the city limits. Number three, that there are extraordinary exceptional conditions pertaining to this particular piece of property. Although this piece of property is large scale and does front 3 roads, it is still well within those businesses that are present there that we see here today. Number four, these conditions do not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. They do. There are plenty of businesses within the city limits that have several frontage roads. That because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property as follows. Application of the current height restrictions, although they have been met in the square footage requirements, would not limit HPS Motorsports from advertising on one of 3 separate streets. And finally, number 6, the authorization of the variance will not be a substantial, the authorization of the variance will be a substantial detriment to the adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will be harmed by the granting of this variance. Although, again, the height requirement has been met, the square footage puts it far beyond anything that is allowed within the city limits, and that does put a detriment to adjacent businesses and properties in the area. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
The nays have it. The motion does not carry. Variance request is approved.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
someone will need to make a motion to approve the variance with
I had that right here. in my
correct
notes.
findings.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The motion does not carry. The question still exists before the board.
I'll make a motion asking the applicant to return at the next scheduled meeting with the proposed modifications as discussed today for further consideration of the board.
Second.
Is there discussion? Did you have a question?
I was gonna second the
Okay.
motion.
All right. The question before the board is to request the applicant return with a design rendering of the new sign as discussed today. We do have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries. The applicant is requested to attend the next regularly scheduled Board of Zoning Appeals meeting with a rendering of the new sign. There being no other items on this evening's agenda, are there any updates from city staff? Any announcements?
Yeah, I would like to introduce one of our new members of our planning staff.
Sure.
Ms. Patricia Carver, she has been a city employee with the building department for some time and has moved down to the planning department, or up to the planning
Yeah,
department.
don't downplay yourself. No.
Right. Physically down on
It's
the
okay.
building, but up, yes.
Very good.
But we'd like to welcome her, and I wanted to introduce her to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Well, thank you, Ms. Carver. Thank you for attending. Our meetings usually aren't this exciting, so you're 1 for 1. Congratulations.
And that's it from staff.
All right. On a personal note, I know many of us know Scott Kazaki very well. He was very instrumental in representing the board in this case. His mother passed away Thursday last, so please keep him in your thoughts and prayers if you don't mind. There being no other items on this evening agenda, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.